Go again?
Are we good? Are we okay?
Hello?
1, 2, 3? 1, 2, 3.
Hold the mic a bit closer.
No, that's all right. Well, I just say a few things, first of all, about the way I work, and then we'll take it from there, where anyone wants to go. I think that the worst thing that people can do when they want to know what's going on in the world, in reality, in self-identity, is to ever think they've got it. Because when you have a situation, and I do think that this should be told to kids at the earliest time they can grasp it. When you think that when you look into whatever space we look into, you're only seeing the most ridiculous sliver of reality. That infinity exists in the space that we're sitting in, but we can only see a tiny band of frequency, and I don't think that's an accident either. And from that perspective, so many things that appear to be paranormal can be understood. It's like if something outside of visible light, as they call it, enters visible light, we can see it. And to us, it seems to have come out of nowhere. And when it leaves visible light, it seems to have disappeared into nowhere. It's not disappeared. It's disappeared from our ability to basically decode it. And so from that perspective, it's ridiculous, I think, for anyone to think I've got it. And what we live in, as I observe the world anyway, is a series of got-its, which we call belief systems. So if you have a religious belief system, you think you've got it. And the rules and regulations of your religious belief system are it. If you are a right-wing political believer or a left-wing political believer, you think you've got it, because that belief system is it. And what this means is that all across the human race are circled wagons around a belief system that says here and no further. So say you have a religious belief system. Well, if you're going to stay within that belief system, you're not going to question it, and you're not going to go anywhere in which it could come under threat or challenge or question, then there's a whole vast area of potential research, insight, understanding, where you simply will not go. And so if you look at the Christian religion, there's vast areas that Christians will not go. I know that for myself. I think what you're saying is very interesting, but I can't listen to what you're saying because you're not a Christian. All right, okay. So that's your limit. Okay. It's like someone once said something very true, that people shouldn't confuse the limits of their own mind with the limits of possibility. But that's what belief systems do. And you look at the Muslim belief system, that's a belief system which has a different, slightly different limits, where you'll go and where you won't go. And there are all these belief systems are the same. And to have a belief system, not one that says, okay, this is how I see it at the moment, but I've got me trainers on, I've got me spikes on. I'm able to go anywhere else if the information will take me there. Not that kind of thing. I mean, a belief system that will not be questioned. All over the world, 8 billion people are entrapped and imprisoned, in my view anyway, by belief systems that will not be questioned. And what that means is that at best, people can only have part of the picture because they deny themselves the possibility of other areas of the picture because they won't go there. And I remember there was an ancient Greek philosopher, Socrates, who said was the effect of, to know is to know you know nothing. That is the true knowledge. And I've always worked on that basis that whatever I think I know at any point, there's always more to know. Always, always. And what happens when you do that is you're constantly seeking or searching for that you don't know, and that takes you deeper and deeper into the rabbit hole of awareness and of uncovering the real nature of human control. And what I see is, even in what's called the alternative media, are people that they say I'm awake. Well, first of all, none of us is awake. None of us. We're in a human body that I would perceive, we'll get into that in the questions, is actually there to keep us asleep, to keep us from knowing. And so what we are is awakening. We're on a process of awakening because there's always more to know. And what I see, and even like I say, in the alternative media as it's become, and the awakening community, is that people get so far and then they stop because they say, I got it. So the alternative media in America now is Christian Trumpism. That's what it is. And what it means is you think you've awakened to the truth, but what you've done is you can see that the world that you're told you're in terms of the way politics runs and finance runs, is not exactly as it really is. And what you've done is you've moved into a slightly bigger prison cell and stopped again. Got it now. Got it. And so when you constantly pursue, okay, so what don't I know? It takes you into areas that different parts of society think are extreme and far out. This is why I'm sort of dismissed by so much of the alternative media as much as the mainstream. Because the mainstream think you're totally a lunatic because their perception of reality, their belief system, the way they see the world is so far from what you're talking about. Because they've not moved and stopped, they've not even moved. They're still the product of the education system and the media system, etc. And then you've got some who've moved into a slightly bigger prison cell, but they're still perceiving the world of the physical. See, they might talk about God and they might talk about Jesus and religion, but in their perceptions of reality, when you really observe them, they're still in the material world, as we call it. And then what I also see are people that they get to a point which they call spiritual, where they are expressing their spirituality as a form of escapism. It's like, okay, I'm spiritual now, so I don't have to think about all that stuff. And I get stick from them because I'm negative. You're negative. You mustn't be negative. And the same people are saying, you must not live in fear. Oh, knowledge is not negative and it's not positive. It just is. So it's how we receive and perceive knowledge that dictates if we see it as a positive or negative thing. So when I'm talking about some of the challenging things that are going on, some people will say, oh, that's negative. You're frightening people. While as other people will say, oh, dear, I didn't know that. Thank you. Thank goodness I know that now because I'm more informed. I'm less scammable now. And it's just about how we receive knowledge. It's like when people say, I'm offended, I am. Well, choose not to be. It's a choice. You know, I get abused all the time and stuff on the kind of internet and all that stuff. But I choose not to be offended. So it doesn't affect me. If I choose to be offended, it affects me. But that's my choice. And, you know, if we fall for this idea of I'm offended, what that means is we're saying someone else controls my life, not me. Someone else controls my emotional balance or imbalance, not me. And yet we can make a different choice and not externalize power over our emotional state and our equilibrium simply by letting it go in one ear and out the other. And so, you know, I've been doing this now for I'm coming into my 36th year, and I've had all this abuse and all that stuff, but it only has an impact on you if you let it. And also, you know, they talk about forgive them for they know not what they do. When you, and I'll finish on this, we'll take questions then, but when you see the scale of perceptual programming that people are subjected to, religious programming, political programming, cultural programming, all of it, it's no wonder that people take on belief systems and from those belief systems judge you as being far out and strange and dangerous because of what they've been indoctrinated to believe. And so you kind of understand why they act towards you as they do. And, you know, if you think that apparently about 5.45 billion of the 8 billion humans identify either as a Christian, a Muslim, or a Hindu. Never mind all the others, just those three. And then you observe the fact that if you look at Christians and Muslims and Hindus, not every last one, no, but the vast overwhelming majority were brought up Christians, were brought up Muslims in Muslim countries, or they were brought up Hindu. Now, that tells you something. it tells you that people aren't making their own choices. They are taking on a belief system which is basically, since childhood, all they've ever known. And so the awakening process is not just opening to more and more knowledge and letting knowledge and let information be the guide and nothing else. It's also about deprogramming ourselves from all the indoctrination. And, you know, they reckon 95% of human behavior comes from the subconscious. And that's that is an extraordinary thing, because we're not aware of the subconscious, not consciously aware of it anyway. And therefore, so much of our behavior is indoctrinated responses in the subconscious mind. And it's that we need to clear out. And we get some questions on this, we can talk about it. Okay, questions?
Hello.
As if I know the answers.
A question, yeah? Toi, tu vas le demander en français?
Hi, David.
I was saying, hello, mate.
I was just wondering how much of religions, if there's any, level of the religious beliefs that are based on actual facts, or according to you, all of it would be bullshit. What's your opinion on that?
You ask a very good question, I think.
Well, you have, because I've just coming to the end of a new book, and the last chapter I'm writing, not the last chapter of the book, but the last chapter that I'm finishing, is about that question. I've never been religious ever. I've always stayed out of it, and I've never believed in orthodox science either. So I not gone with either of them. I've always thought there was something greater, even when I was a kid, but religion wasn't it. And I'm just reading a series of books at the moment for this last chapter, which are very, very interesting in relation to whether Jesus existed. And they all agree from their different research that he didn't, and that the Gospels were written by basically a Roman family dynasty called the Flavians. And it is extraordinary when it's laid out. And I took a series of books so that I didn't get it from just one, to see that there was a military campaign by one of these Flavians, a Flavian Caesar called Titus, which ended in 73 AD. And it was a military campaign against the people of Judea. And the only the only documented, and then there's some questions about it, but the only documents that describe this campaign were written by an apparently Jewish historian called Josephus. Well, it turns out Josephus was a Flavian and wrote what he called the Wars of the Jews in Rome. And what these documenting this Titus campaign, and what these researchers who've written these books all conclude is that when you put the Gospels together with the stories of the Wars of the Jews, which is supposed to be a real description of the Titus military campaign. They're the same. Not only does Jesus visit the same places that Titus did in his military campaign, but in the same sequence, the same order. And there's so much more stuff in it. And so it seems pretty clear from, and like I say, there's vastly more evidence that I'm talking about, that there was no Jesus. So why did they do that? Well, the Romans, when they were taking over that area of the world, they had a lot of resistance from, quote, Jewish rebels, rebel organizations. And these rebel organizations had a belief that a Messiah was coming that was not a Prince of Peace. This Messiah was going to lead them in battle against the Romans. So what they set out to do, because, you know, they had the big battles which destroyed Jerusalem in 70 AD, I think it was, and then the Masada final battle in 73 AD. But they thought, well, these people aren't going away. So how can we change what they believe? So what they set out to do was create a pacifist Messiah who said, turn the other cheek. They also wanted a Messiah that would support Roman rule, even if by default. Things like give unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and so on. And over the period of Roman rule, Christianity was turned into this religion that has now become, of course, massively global. And so this Christian religion, which supposedly started in Palestine, stroke Israel, actually was all orchestrated from Rome. That's why we have the Vatican in Rome. That's why we have the Roman Church. And it's become this massive global religion. And what they were using in the writing of the Gospels, which it appears Josephus was involved in, was something called typology. And that means that they were taking what we now call Old Testament personalities like Moses as blueprints for the characters in the New Testament, which they were writing. Because what they did is when Josephus wrote about the Titus campaign, it was then that the Old Testament, the Gospels, started to be written. And what they did was set them 40 years earlier or more in the earlier part of the first century. And what that meant was that the Titus campaign had been written, it had happened, but now, because they were resetting it earlier, even though they were writing it at the same time, they could put prophecies in to the Old Testament Gospels, the New Testament Gospels, that appeared to be prophecies of things that were foretold, but actually they'd already bloody happened. Like the destruction of Jerusalem, which Jesus talks about in the Gospels. But it had already happened. So, and this typology idea, you can see in relation to Moses being the blueprint for Jesus. and similar things happening, in putting in a different context, but similar things happening. And what it is they looked at, because these people that were producing the Gospels were experts in Jewish law, and they were picking up prophecies from these more ancient texts, like I say, what was now called the Old Testament, etc. And they were making them fit things that happened in the New Testament, which they were writing in that period I'm talking about. And so there's a Moses prophecy that this person would emerge out of the Israelites and would basically be what we would call today the Messiah. And what they did was wrote the New Testament as if Jesus was what Moses predicted. And it was very, very interesting, because what I then did was I started looking at Christian websites and seeing what they were saying today. And one of the ways that they are saying Jesus is definitely the Messiah is that Moses had predicted his coming. And this whole thing about typology and blueprint people, blueprint sequences, and making prophecies appear to happen, I think you can look at that in terms of religion in its entirety. Not necessarily every last one, but if you wanted to have a religion that controls people and every aspect of their life, which is what the game is, you would come up with the Jewish religion. Because I cannot believe the level of dictatorial do's and don'ts on the lives of people that accept that people even today are following. And it's controlling their life in fine detail. So there's the first one. And then the idea of the Flavian conspiracy was to not replace it, but to make Christianity appear to be an extension of it and the next stage of it. And then I look at Islam. And I see all the things in Islam that believe the same as Christianity and the same as Judaism. A lot of people don't realize that Islam believes in Mother Mary, believes in Jesus, believes in Abraham, believes in King David. And it's like when I've looked at this whole typology technique of making something appear to be the next stage of something, I'm looking at Islam in a new light. And what did I just say there? If you look at Judaism, you look at Christianity, you look at Islam, look at Hinduism, come to that, you're looking at phenomenal do's, don'ts, and impositions on behavior and thought, perception, that otherwise wouldn't be there. And if your whole basis of what you're trying to do is to control people, then religions are absolutely frickin' perfect. I've been calling religion since the 1990s the greatest form of mind control ever invented. And you know, if people want to follow a religion, it's none of my business. But there's this feeling that just because you follow a religion, then you've got to try to kind of impose it or convince other people to follow the same thing. And they're all, I would say, prisons of the mind. That doesn't mean that there's not some good stuff that comes out of it. I mean, do unto others as you would have them do unto you is a showstopper for me. But the overall impact is one of control and limitation, and that's what they want the human race to be. Because in the end, we'll get into some deeper levels of this when we get into reality, I'm sure. The whole foundation of human control, the whole foundation of it, the entire concrete block, is control of perception. Not least because I say perception becomes reality, but if you can control perception, you control behavior. Because we behave as we do because we perceive as we do. And religions are absolutely perfect at limiting perception because they do not care. When I say they, I mean this force that I'm writing about. They don't care what you believe so long as you believe it rigidly and without question, because then they got you. So you've got the world of the cult, even though it's compartmentalized, enormously advanced knowledge compared with the population is passed on through the inner circles of the cult. Knowledge of A, where humanity is being taken, and B, the nature of reality itself. Because if you can keep the nature of reality from the population, and the population think they live in a solid world and it's all apart from everything else, well, you're in a massively powerful position of control.